So I think the conversation that we originally had when I talked to college Dems was how do we protect a woman's right to choose, and kind of gave it a nanosecond's thought and everything, and tied it back to some other things. And one of the things that we tied it back into was Medicare for all. Is once we pass Medicare for all, what we've done at that point is we've created a national program, right? A national healthcare program in terms of funding. But the really cool thing about creating that program, not just for funding, is that we have a platform now to create a universal basic healthcare standard for women, right? You know, which is a big deal.
Um, yeah, because like when we talk about people wanting to defund Planned Parenthood, the argument always comes up. Well, Planned Parenthood doesn't, services that they have for abortions are just a very small fraction of the services that they offer.
Right.
They have a host of cancer screenings and STD stuff, and well woman exams that they give, and sex ed and screenings for men that they can do. So.
And this would all go, into that, right?
Yeah.
So the cool thing is once we define that universal basic healthcare standard for women, it's not only protected by right, it's mandated by service agreement, and that's the awesome thing about making it a federal program.
So my question then would be: are there any drawbacks to that?
Yes. And this is something I've thought about. So there is a drawback to that. And right now, in terms of women's choice, it varies from state to state, and each state has very specific restrictions that they're laying on, and doing it very specifically. If we create that universal basic healthcare standard, that now is a federal program, right? It is a federal standard, and once you take away that from the states and make it national, it suddenly does make the whole idea of women's choice susceptible to the Supreme Court,
Yeah.
and suddenly by creating a program where we protect a woman's right to choose, we can also endanger Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, and we have probably one of the most conservative Supreme Courts that we've had in a long time.
Yeah.
We'll have that for probably the next 25 years. So what's the idea to protect a woman,
Right.
a woman's right to choose then in that case?
Well, at that point, that's kind of got something to do with something that I actually wrote about today, and that's the right to privacy, right? We know that there's not an actual constitutional right to privacy. What we infer that from is the protection from illegal search and seizure, the right to not incriminate ourselves. There is I think the Ninth Amendment, which basically says, hey, just because we haven't listed it in the Constitution doesn't mean you don't have it. And then there's the 14th, which is due process. Now here's the thing. Once again, I say it's inferred by all these. We can go, there's not a real right to privacy, but because these things exist, if we string them together and we have a court that, is open to that interpretation and views the Constitution as a living document, we have an implied right to privacy. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, we have a court that is probably the most conservative it's ever been. They call themselves originalists now, and they're going to be in place for 25 years. So how do we protect this? We need to have an amendment that actually codifies what a right to privacy is, and it's not just for women's reproductive rights and the right to choose, but absolutely, the right to agency over their own body is in that. But I've got my laptop open right now. I have a window for social media. We have our campaign stuff, our search engines and things like that. All this data, all this metadata and everything like that, it exists out there. How we live is no longer defined by the walls in our house, right? Everything that we do inside, now takes place online as well. And because of that, more than ever, especially when we have a Congress who recently kind of sold us out, with net neutrality and is in the pockets of, all of the, all the communications in the communications industry. Well, we need to codify what exactly privacy is, and once we do that, we can ensure that we not only protect ourselves from, basically outside influences, we can codify what a right to agency over one's body is, and call that privacy is, and that's kind of a next step, next level thing. So, which we found is one of the big things when we're coming up with ideas on how to improve society and everything. You have to think 3 steps ahead, right? Which is cool. So, hopefully, when people go to the polls and make their decision, they'll find somebody who can think 3 steps ahead. Luckily, I'm running.